Well, folks, it looks like the trade war drums are sounding once more, and this time they're louder and more threatening than ever before. Remember that time when trade wars were good and easy to win? Yeah, me neither, because those were just the ramblings of a man who thinks international trade is as simple as a game of hungry hippos. The global economy finds itself once again caught in a high-stakes trade battle, a tangled web of tariffs and sanctions that could easily push us all into a full-blown economic disaster. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck, except instead of twisted metal and fire, we're talking about plummeting stock markets and skyrocketing prices on everything from cars to coffee. It all kicked off, unsurprisingly, with someone who has a knack for Twitter and a loose understanding of international trade. That's right. President Donald Trump introduced a 10% tariff on Chinese imports and a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, sparking significant economic turmoil. You might think that a 10% tariff is no big deal, a small poke in the ribs of global trade. But let me tell you, in the complex world of international commerce, even the slightest tug can unravel the entire fabric of the system. And China, well, they're not taking this tariff lying down. In retaliation, they've slapped a massive 75% tariff on American goods, sending shockwaves through multiple industries. From skyrocketing car prices to interrupted supply chains, this clash is shaking up global markets, leaving companies scrambling and consumers on edge. So fasten your seatbelts, folks, because we're about to dive into the depths of this trade war. First up, let's talk about something near and dear to many of our hearts, or at least our wallets, the auto industry. Now, that 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico might sound like a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. But let me tell you, it's about to get real for anyone looking to buy a new car. See, those tariffs are like a gut punch to car manufacturers, forcing them to raise prices on everything from pickup trucks to minivans. And who ultimately ends up footing the bill? You guessed it, the American consumer. That's right, folks. Get ready to shell out thousands of dollars more for your next vehicle, all thanks to this trade war. But it's not just the price tag that's taking a hit. This whole mess is also threatening to slam the brakes on job growth in the auto industry. With higher prices come lower sales, and lower sales mean layoffs. So much for those promises of bringing back manufacturing jobs, eh? Next, let's talk about something you might not have heard of, but is absolutely crucial to our modern lives. Rare earth metals. These aren't just shiny rocks you find in your backyard. They're essential components in everything from smartphones and electric cars to wind turbines and guided missiles. And guess what? China controls a whopping 80% of the world's production of these critical elements. They've essentially cornered the market, and they know it. Now, remember those retaliatory tariffs we talked about earlier? Well, China decided to get strategic and slapped export restrictions on these rare earth metals, sending shockwaves through industries that rely on them. Imagine a world where your smartphone screen goes dark because we can't get the materials to make new ones. Or picture wind turbines standing idle because we can't get the magnets needed to make them spin. It's a scary thought, and it's a stark reminder of just how vulnerable this trade war makes us. Now, let's talk about the future of transportation electric vehicles. You'd think that in the midst of a climate crisis, we'd be doing everything we could to encourage the adoption of cleaner, greener vehicles, right? Well, this trade war has other plans. With a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles, the US has effectively slammed the brakes on the EV revolution. These tariffs make it significantly more expensive for American consumers to buy electric cars, pushing them further out of reach for many. It's like trying to promote a healthy lifestyle by slapping a tax on kale and quinoa while subsidizing Big Macs and fries. It just doesn't make sense. This short-sighted policy not only hurts the environment, but also hinders the growth of a promising industry and leaves the US lagging behind in the global race to electric mobility. Chapter 4. The Great Semiconductor. Shortage. Speaking of getting left behind, let's move on to another critical industry feeling the heat of this trade war. Semiconductors. These tiny chips are the brains behind virtually every electronic device we use, from smartphones and laptops to cars and airplanes. And where are most of these semiconductors made? You guessed it, China. Now, with increased tariffs on Chinese semiconductors and the looming threat of export restrictions, we're staring down the barrel of a global semiconductor shortage. This means longer wait times for the latest gadgets, higher prices for everything from gaming consoles to washing machines, and potential disruptions to industries that rely on a steady supply of these essential components. Chapter 5. The Energy Sector. A gusher of uncertainty. Next up, let's talk about something near and dear to many American hearts and wallets: oil. Now, you might think that a trade war with China, one of the world's largest oil consumers, would send shockwaves through the US energy industry, and you'd be right, but not in the way you might expect. See, instead of crippling the US energy sector, China's decision to reduce imports of American oil has actually led to lower oil prices. That's right, folks, the trade war has inadvertently given American consumers a bit of a break at the pump. But don't get too comfortable, because this temporary dip in prices is a double-edged sword. While lower prices might sound good to consumers, they're a gut punch to American oil producers, who are now facing shrinking profits and mounting pressure to cut jobs. Chapter 6. The healthcare system feeling the pain. Now let's talk about something that should be a fundamental right, not a bargaining chip in a trade war: healthcare. Unfortunately, that's exactly what it's become. With a 50% tariff on Chinese medical supplies, the US healthcare system is facing a perfect storm of rising costs and potential shortages. Everything from surgical masks and gloves to critical medical equipment is affected by these tariffs, putting immense pressure on hospitals and healthcare providers already grappling with the ongoing pandemic. These tariffs are like a band-aid on a bullet wound, addressing the symptoms but ignoring the root cause of the problem. Chapter 7. Global trade, the great unraveling. Finally, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the future of global trade. This trade war isn't just about tariffs and sanctions. It's about a fundamental shift away from the interconnected global economy that has defined the past few decades. With each new tariff and retaliatory measure, the fabric of globalization is fraying a little more. Countries are scrambling to diversify their supply chains, reduce their dependence on China, and forge new regional trade agreements. This fragmentation of global trade is like a slow-motion earthquake, reshaping the geopolitical landscape and creating a more uncertain and volatile world. The road ahead: uncertainty and opportunity. So, there you have it, folks, a glimpse into the chaotic and uncertain world of the 2025 trade war. As we've seen, this economic tug-of-war is having far-reaching consequences, impacting everything from the cars we drive to the phones in our pockets. The big question is, where do we go from here? Will we emerge from this trade war stronger and more resilient, or will we stumble backward into a world of protectionism and economic isolation? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure: this is a story that's far from over. What are your thoughts on this trade conflict? Will it foster economic growth through self-sufficiency, or will it push industries deeper into crisis? Share your view in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates and in-depth analysis. Thank you for watching. See you next time.